Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1081 of our daily content grind, and it is Tuesday, which means it's time for a top 10, or in my case, a Here's 10. And of course we are still going on every year of Transformers and figuring out, or at least telling you what my opinion is on the 10 best toys of every single year. So where were we in 2008? Well, the movie line doesn't really play much factor. It was mostly surviving on repaints of the main cast to meet demand for those characters. Titanium was down to just a few exclusives left, Alternators was completely done, and Masterpiece was still just kind of trudging along with only 3 molds to its name. So we don't really have to worry about a whole lot of outside lines this year, but this is the first year of Universe 2.0, which would eventually evolve into what we call Generations, which would evolve and continue to stay on the store shelves until this very day. It's also the year of Transformers Animated. I know there's a lot of people who just didn't like the aesthetic of the franchise, but even a lot of people who would say they didn't like the look will still agree that it's some of the best engineered toys we ever got, with incredibly intuitive transformations, really clever figures, and just really good engineering all the way around. No surprise, we're going to be talking a lot of animated today. So, with that being said, here are the top 10 Transformers of the year 2008, and we're going to start with the Universe 2 lineup. I will admit, Universe 2 is in its infancy, so a lot of the toys are a little bit rough, but there are some where they're just so well done or so solid, we just have to give them credit, and the first one we're going to talk about is Sunstreaker. I think everyone was taken aback by this. I mean, everyone was going nuts because everyone said, like, it's the return of classics, even though, obviously, there is definitely some movie aesthetic going into the new engineering. It's not straight up the G1 character, you know, with a brand new coat of paint. There's a little bit of tweaking. There's a little bit of modernization going on here, a little bit more contemporary, if you will. That said, still looks really good, still looks really, really close to what I would expect out of any Sunstreaker. And what was really surprising about this was just from the first time someone got this in hand, we figured out what the trick to this toy was. The fact that the torso was reversible and Sunstreaker's chest was the back, Sunstreaker's chest was the backside of Sideswipe, meaning that one mold was going to produce both brothers. Then we figured out that the turbo engine on Sunstreaker was going to be the jetpack on Sideswipe. Then we figured out the gun could combine with the engine if you wanted a bigger weapon. And all of a sudden, you have all these little engineering tricks that just made this toy absolutely genius. And they even threw in this weird little automorph where rotating the top part, or in this case his chest, is going to raise Sunstreaker's head. A lot of really nice little tricks of engineering going on in this toy, and overall just a brilliant way of getting the two brothers to actually share a mold, which is not something that usually happens, ironically enough. But in this one instance, it was brilliant. It gave us the brand new Sideswipe and Sunstreaker, and it was just an absolutely genius mold. I will admit I do have a preference to a big solid figure, so when Universe 2.0 brought back the Ultra Size class, I was actually really excited for it. Though to be fair with you, I'm not sure it ever really reached the heights of its very first release. My favorite one out of the whole bunch ended up being Onslaught, seen here in both American and Japanese color scheme, take your pick. I love turning him into this giant SWAT APC. I love the look of it. I thought it was a great way of modernizing it without actually producing like that super long military truck that the original G1 toy was. It's not exactly practical in a lot of modern or real world settings, but this is just a beast of a vehicle, producing an incredibly cool looking updated take on the original character. And it's one that kind of outshines its original so much you don't really like expect it to be the torso of a combiner. You know, that was the thing with incorporating a character like Onslaught. You're expecting them to actually have a full set of Combaticons if you did one, but this This kind of told you it's just going to do its own thing, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes you can get away with the combiner characters just being off on their own. This was a brilliant example of that. Super beefy vehicle, lights and sounds were good if you got the second run that didn't have the glitch. And overall, just like an absolute beast of a figure, the likes of which we hadn't seen in a very long time. Yeah, this one was a lot of fun. Still own this one as the Bakkan Clench. And yeah, that's still a fun one to break out once in a while. Fantastic toy. Let's start in with the animated toys, and it shouldn't come as any kind of surprise that this character actually made the list, because I was just happy they brought my boy back. Let's talk about Blitzwing. So we're not going to like mention things like, oh, there's treads hanging off of the bottom of the plane. We're not really concerned about that because this is a completely new take on Blitzwing, and that's actually a lot more on model for the show. So we don't really have to be like frustrated or concerned about some tank mode stuff still being visible. No. This Blitzwing handles the triple changing fairly well. Like, yes, the treads are weird, but I accept that jet because that's what it was in the cartoon. I accept this squat little tank. I love this squat little tank. It's does not look practical in the least. Every time I see one like this, I mentioned that it reminds me of a tank from Metal Slug, where it's kind of built vertically. It's like this big meatball of metal rather than actual like tank proportion. But I love how they engineered it. I love how it works. And then, of course, the robot mode looks fantastic. And then you also have something that would become legendary with this figure, the 3 faces gimmick, where all 3 of his modes kind of have like a designated personality, which is kind of cool. Kind of a neat idea. I like that. So, great take on Blitzwing, but also just really fun toy. Triple changers in general just give you so much more play value. You know, it's just a lot of fun to mess with. And yeah, I was just happy to see Blitzwing again. Animated was a surprise from top to bottom, so you're going to see some deluxe figures and, you know, even some Voyager figures outclassing leader class figures here. This is where we go for bang for your buck, right? So if we're going bang for your buck, then we're going to talk about the Cybertron version of animated Optimus Prime. In his Cybertronian truck mode, it's kind of on the simplistic side. I'll give it that. That's the only reason why it's this low. Everything else about the figure I found to be absolutely fantastic. Transformation is really smooth. I like that it includes an axe. It comes across like a small version of the one he had in the show. In general, between things like that and his much more like lithe proportions here, I feel like it's a really good representation of just a younger, slimmer Optimus Prime before he kind of beefed up and came to Earth. It's a really nice look. It's a really good looking figure. But what puts it ahead is the little stuff, like the fact that, you know, the shield that forms the top of the vehicle becomes, you know, a bigger blade for the axe. My favorite part is the way this toy transforms. There's so much articulation in this toy that during transformation, he doesn't have to let go of the axe. That's insane. And it also means he can dual wield the axe even over his head. His articulation is that solid. Just absolutely dead solid Optimus Prime. Like a modern bendy Prime, if you will, for anyone who wanted a articulation heavy version of the character. And this one was popular for a long time, and for a really good reason. You know this was a stacked year when this character comes in number 6, but you knew he was going to be in here at some point. Let's discuss Lockdown. This toy is brilliant, by the way. The only reason he's lower on this list, and I know a lot of you would put him, is because play value-wise, I think there are better figures coming up. And this guy is not entirely flawless, by the way. He's always had this weird things where his hands don't fold out completely. But that's minor nitpicks, really. Like, the brilliance of this toy is how well it used its bulk to create the robot mode. The story I like to tell all the time is that a friend of mine assumed this was a Voyager toy because the robot mode was so big. Really, it's just using the length of the vehicle mode to stretch the robot mode's height as much as possible. It's a brilliant trick. It's one I have no idea why they have not tried to replicate since then. it produces such a unique figure that to this day, people are hoping for a brand new proper lockdown toy. We got the Star Raider one, but it ain't this one. This one still holds its place as like one of the most unique and impressive Transformer toys just for how clever the design work of it is. You know, beyond that, it's gimmick simple, right? Gimmick simple, you know, just little flip out guns on the engine, but you don't really need it. You know, it's not really the point of the toy. The point of the toy is how good the engineering is, and yeah, this is such a shining point in animated. This is going to seem like deja vu, because again, this is a toy that could be higher up on your list, but there's just toys I happen to enjoy a little bit more, but it's definitely worthy of being here. Let's talk about Optimus Prime again. But this time we're going to be talking about the Voyager class Optimus Prime. Now, this one is a little bit odd because it does contain a little bit of automorphic gimmick. During transformation, you basically unlock the legs from the vehicle mode, and it will spin down from the back side to the underside of the robot mode. And that's a weird trick, but it does technically work. It doesn't technically get in the way. It's just odd. What gets me about the toy is a lot of variety options, kind of like Cybertron Optimus Prime. Do you want the axe kibble to be on his back or not? Well, you can. Like, you can take it off, and it just kind of looks like how he does in the show without his big fire truck trailer. Do you want him to have a mouth plate or not? Because that can come down. Like, that's really cool. I also really like the fact that, yeah, it's an off-model axe, but it's a huge axe, so I like that. And I do like that he actually does come with a water-squirting cannon, because fire truck. To my knowledge, this is the last Transformer toy that actually came with a water-squirting gimmick, so he does hold a little bit of notoriety in, as far as, like, Transformer history there. Death of a very long-running gimmick in the franchise. That said, everything else is pretty spot on. Articulation is great. Transformation is smooth. Obviously, the robot mode is very clean. Great resemblance to the cartoon. Yeah, I'm just going to run out of ways of saying it. Animated toys just plain looked good if you liked the aesthetic. They are done exceptionally well, and this Voyager Prime is absolutely up there. We need to get some big boys in here. We need to get a leader class toy in here to talk about, and I will go ahead and spoil it now. Megatron for me is a little bit too simple to make the list, especially for the $40, $45 price point leader classes we're rocking at the time. But we are going to put my boy Bulkhead up because this was pretty stellar. On top of the fact that it's just this giant hunk of metal as far as like the vehicle mode goes, turning into like the big portly, take on Bulkhead that we see here. I love the little things that it does. Like I love all the little weapon accessories that he's got on him. I love the talking gimmick. I think because of his big jaw, the talking gimmick that the leader toys all had worked best on him. One of the things I love the most, and it's not pictured here in the stock photos, this is the one that came with the Headmaster unit. And they made sure all the leader class molds from this point on could actually wear the Headmaster unit on top of everything else that all those toys had to do, which I thought was a really smart thing to do. It's a really clever inclusion. So yeah, the big Bulkhead toy, this just felt satisfying. Like, because of the big bulk of the toy, and how hefty the parts and everything was on him, he just felt good to mess with, Like, big chunks, solid robot, really chunky parts for transforming. It's a tactile experience, a really good one. On top of the fact, the likeness from the show, really good as well. Absolutely one of the best. Where is Bulkhead? Why don't we get more Bulkhead more often? Universe 2.0 is not done just yet. There's one toy I have always held in exceptionally high regard. It's been outclassed since then, but I think for its time, it is still an exceptionally good figure. Let's talk one more time about Cyclonus. This is where bang for your buck comes in when it comes to my grading system. This toy does things so well for its price point. For being a $10 or $12 toy, this thing does such a good job of what it's going for. Very nicely articulated, looks so good as a modern take on Cyclonus. Obviously here leaning more toward the toy than the animation model. I I love the vehicle mode. I love how sleek the vehicle mode was. This was in the day where every jet had underkibble. You know, we weren't really anticipating, you know, getting a Cyclonus that didn't have a bunch of arms or legs hanging out from underneath him. It just didn't happen. So the way this thing transforms to accomplish it is really, really smart. What's smarter is how Nightstick was handled. So it's not enough that it mounts in the vehicle mode just like it did in G1, you know, for year 4. It's not enough that he can hold it like a traditional target master. In the Japanese version, in Headmasters, the target masters didn't just form a handgun. They actually fit onto the front of the forearm of the Transformer, replacing their fist. You know, it's kind of one of the first times we had an arm-mounted weapon in a Transformer, at least, you know, the way that we have them all the time, thanks to the movies now. But they made sure that was possible as well. That's a lot of little tricks to fit in on a deluxe toy. Top that off with the fact that it's one of the few times where light piping really works well. It's just the right shade of red to let a lot of light in and look really fiery. And yeah, you have an absolutely fantastic all-around figure. For a desktop-sized Cyclonus, it's still really, really solid and really, really nice. Especially if you have the repaint. All purple repaint's a thing as well. Yeah. Very, very good. Very, very good. Easily my favorite out of Universe 2.0. Talk about brilliant Transformer engineering, though. Next up, we're going to talk about a Transformer toy that does something that no other Transformer toy had ever done and has not done since. It is a 4-mode figure with 2 vehicles and 2 robots. This is Shockwave, or Long Arm Prime, if you will. This is genius. This is absolute brilliance. So you've got a vehicle. You've got the crane mode for Long Arm Prime, and then you have the tank mode for Shockwave. You know, and they're similar, but they're distinct enough to where, like, I actually believe that crane mode is just a disguise that Shockwave is taking on, same as Long Arm is. And Long Arm still manages to look distinct enough. You know, he looks much more standard, much more solid and beefy. And then all the stuff that extends and shapeshifts on Shockwave in order to separate the two out from each other. You could have the gray one on your shelf as Long Arm, and then, you know, have the purple one as Shockwave. And, you know, you would just think they're remolds of each other, not the same exact toy with different color schemes. Fantastic. Like, one of the best faction switching toys of all time, because it's the only one that goes all the way and disguises their vehicle mode as well. On top of just how much play value that gets you. That's 2 full Transformer toys for the price of 1. That's really cool. They even found a way of working in a few little spring gimmicks for his weapon as well. Just because they could. Absolutely genius figure all the way around. One of the best, I think, Hasbro's ever produced. If we're talking about toys I just plain enjoyed, though, I could say, without shadow of a doubt, without any doubt in my mind, Shockwave's the best toy of 2008 and one of the best toys Hasbro's ever produced. But this is my list and my preferences, and my preferences lean toward just what felt good. You know, what feels good to play with, what hits me the right way aesthetically, and for everything that hits my buttons, I go to Ultra Magnus. So for starters, again, I still really like the mouth talking, and, you know, like a little more like animatronic-esque gimmick, and it works really well here. I love this reimagining on Ultra Magnus. You know, I love this gigantic armored truck look that he's got. I think it's a great, you know, much more serious upgrade to the car carrier. I think it gets the original style of Ultra Magnus across without, like, having to just make it a white Optimus Prime with a different trailer. And then you've got just how solid and clean his transformation is. He feels really good to transform. You've got all the hidden weapons that work in the vehicle mode, and then they work in the robot mode as well. You work in the Magnus hammer, you know, which that's become a whole thing in and of itself. It's just satisfying. This Ultra Magnus toy is satisfying. To the point where I really wouldn't have minded if this kind of became the Ultra Magnus thing. It almost did. Prime did a similar Ultra Magnus toy before reverting to just, we're going to retool Optimus Prime into an Ultra Magnus. Disappointing, but so close, right? So close to greatness. This is a fantastic update on Ultra Magnus, and one I really wish we would see again, because I think it's got a lot of fantastic potential if they ever wanted to make a mold similar to this again. But that is in the future. For the past, for 2008, I'm gonna call Magnus my favorite toy of 2008, and that takes us to the end of another countdown. I feel like there's so many pet favorites that this is going to be very divisive. I can already tell someone in the comments section is very upset that Lugnut did not make the list. I love that toy. Don't get me wrong. This was a very difficult year to trim because there's so many good toys that came out. I did my best to be impartial, and I did my best to just kind of like convey honestly how I feel about this list. So, you're free to discuss it in the comments below, as long as you keep it civil. And as always, I will see you next time.